Hey, friends, loves, beauties. I wanted to have a minute with you to look at this movement of what does it mean to unburden your anger so that it can truly serve you. And this is related to the masterclass series or the depth practicum series that begins in May 22nd, where I'm going to be looking at 4 archetypes or aspects of deep feminine power, and we're going to be unburdening each of them. So the first one is unburdening warrior, right? Rage. So it's warrior, lover, witch, pilgrim, unburdening anger, rage, unburdening sexuality, unburdening magic, wisdom, the wild, and unburdening the call to the sacred path. So that's what the series is. There's information below. I am in preparation now for the first one, which is warrior. And the consideration and the question that I'm asking and that I'm drawing on the body of her mystery school to kind of bring forward some considerations around is, how do we unburden anger? And so what I want to share with you today are a couple of thoughts about that, and also just even this consideration of what unburdening really is, because this is something I've been working with this past year especially, that's starting to really inform how I'm holding the school and how I'm doing my life, how I work with my own practice. But this understanding that there are a lot of possible things that we could think we need to do about ourselves, about aspects of ourselves, about life, about other people. And in general, if we want to think about it, what we could align with is unburdening, and align with the understanding that in true nature, like if you can unburden yourself, if you can unburden your rage, if you can unburden your sexuality, if you can unburden the magic in you, if you can unburden anything, it will be in its true nature. And that's all that really needs to happen, right? Like we're not trying to become something that we're not. We're not trying to meet all these shoulds. There's no ideal that we're headed towards. We're in a becoming. Our true nature is trustworthy. But definitely we are in a world, in kind of a walk in life that requires unburdening, that requires a certain amount of redemption, ripening, sophistication, maturing, right? It's asking something of us. But if we understand that, at least for me, it's been really helpful to understand that, there's an effortlessness in unburdening. You let the burden fall away. You allow yourself to see what is burdening. And in that alone, there's a space that's created, a little wiggle starts to happen around these things that have gotten crusted onto you, or distortions that have gotten kind of anchored in our beings. Anger is an amazing one for that, right? I mean, how often does your anger move and it's unbearable in your being, for one thing? Inevitably, it destroys something, right? Or it leaves you feeling really helpless, and then it still destroys something, right? There's a lot that happens with anger, and this is why we're considering it, because ultimately, in this understanding of unburdening, we approach everything with a kind of conviction that at its essence, there's something true there, right? That there is something of the good, or there is a volition toward liberation, or there is a volition towards benevolence and towards wisdom inside of everything, everyone, inside of anger, inside of sex, inside of, all these things. And yet, unless we reckon with the distortions of that, it won't express itself the way that it is meant to express, right? So when we talk about anger, unburdening anger so that it serves you, serves your families, serves your relationships, and actually serves your world, then what we're talking about is taking a moment, particularly in this series, we're going to be taking a moment to look at what are the distortions specifically around anger. What is burdening? What is burdening the movement of anger inside of you, making it a destructive force rather than a liberating one? Right? So I wrote down a few things. These are just a couple things to consider if you want to be considering this with me, as I'm sitting in some deep consideration with it, preparing for this unburdening series. One thing is to understand. So, what are the distortions? Well, first of all, understanding what anger's real purpose is. It's a liberating force. It's fire. It's meant to burn off impurities. It's meant to liberate, right? However, it's fire. So it is also powerful, and it also requires real mastery, um, a level of maturity, and a level of containment. It asks something. If you want to move with anger in a way that does actually liberate according to its sacred nature, then you and I, all of us, are going to have to go through essentially what warriors training is. We're going to have to allow ourselves to enter into actual stewardship of the power that anger is. And what that requires is understanding its true nature. What is the true nature of anger? Let's just say one thing about that, which is that it's here to liberate rather than destroy. And it is actually rare that destruction is necessary in order for liberation. And if destruction is necessary for liberation, the way that true clean anger will do that will actually liberate the situation, not further entangle it, not further corrupt it, not further confuse it, not drive it deeper into the psyche, not actually perpetuate whatever it is, whatever poison you're wanting to, liberate yourself or the world from, right? So that's one of the things I would offer, is that um, anger has a true nature, and part of unburdening it is to just start to ask, what is the true nature of that? And then you can start to see maybe some of the distortions that come in there. One of the distortions, I would say the first one, is that your anger is your own, right? It is an energy, it's a power, it's a force of nature inside of you that you need to learn how to harness, that I need to learn how to harness. It is mine. The anger that comes up in me often, right, has a responsive quality, right? But the energy itself is mine. And the moment I step outside of that, I've lost true agency in relationship to it, right? That's a big ask, because there are a lot of things that make us angry. There are a lot of things that we feel helplessly angry about. And that's one of the things we're really going to address, because a lot of the distortions around anger come not from anger itself, but from the helplessness that we're either not acknowledging or not attending to, that is coupled with the anger, right? A helpless anger will not really have any good effect, right? It won't have power in it. And it often gets distorted because we aren't in a state of holding the sword, knowing that we know how to use it, knowing what is ours to do, and directing our own energy towards what is actually empowering in any given situation that makes us angry. There are a lot of ways that we end up feeling helplessly angry. One of them is just when we take on more than what is ours to even do, or more than what is possible. You can be angry about a lot of things, and I'm going to guess that a lot of them are huge. They're societal. They're the result of thousands of years of history and human bewilderment. It's outside of your hands. A lot of things are outside of your hands, but a lot of things are very much within your grasp. Part of what anger is here to do is to keep you clean. It's a purifying force. So it wants to show you where action is necessary. But if in your world, inside of you, you are burdened with impossible expectations of life, of this very flawed life, impossible expectations of yourself, of your own limited being, right? Then you're going to start feeling there's going to be helplessness in it, and it's going to get distorted, right? These are just some of the considerations now. I'm just kind of tangentializing because all of this is inside of me right now and finding its way into a clearer articulation for this unburdening series. But those are some considerations, and I haven't stayed with my notes, so forgive me if I just repeat. What I would say, another piece I would say about anger in terms of what its true nature is, right, is that if it is unburdened, and if it is wizened and ripened, right, it's a raw force, we are asked to steward it, right, and to be in alliance with it, to ride the chariot, not be trampled by it, right? So we become wizened, we become ripened, we unburden anger, and then we see that at its root, in its true nature, anger and or the arts of the warrior has the purpose to protect what is sacred, right? It's why it also won't go away. Their anger has sacred purpose. It is meant to protect, right? And what you can see maybe in yourself if you're willing to. Certainly it's probably easier for you to see it in the world and in others because it's always like that. You can see the ways in which the intention to protect what may be vulnerable, what may be sacred, often ends up acting in destruction or coercion or aggression towards other things. So there's a very subtle shift here where the volition has to always remain towards protecting the sacred and then move out of that. In order to protect the sacred, you must be in integrity, right? You have to be in resonance. You have to be worthy of what you protect. That's what's being called for, right? So when we're going into, particularly in this series, we're going to go deep into the warrior arts in terms of all that is actually required to be one that actually moves with anger in a way that liberates rather than destroys. It is not easy. It is a lifelong devotion, just like any warrior art is, right? But what do warriors, what are some of those things? Self-discipline, right? I wrote them down. Cultivation of personal power, true cultivation of personal power, which you will always know because it is not in opposition to anything else, right? A lot of where we see anger moving in our culture and often moving in ourselves is that it always convinces us that it's in opposition to, it's very clear, it seems, it's very convincing that it's all about opposition and it's all about this and it's all about who's going to win and who's going to be right and all these things. The reality is that anger is inviting a much greater embodiment of personal power, which will always exist as it is and does not need, and actually will not tolerate being defined by opposition, because personal power is true nature, and true nature just is what she is. And once we get there, this almost neutral, unassailable state of being, that's when we actually become a real agent of change and a real agent of liberation, because it doesn't look like what a lot of what we've been kind of enculturated to think the revolutionary looks like, or the passionate whatever justice seeker looks like. It has wisdom in it. And once you're actually moving with your anger, if from a place of real personal power and connected to wisdom at the same time, then what's going to happen is you're going to become supple in it. It's not going to make you bitter. You're not going to be helpless in it. You're also not going to be overcharged by it. You're going to be supple, and you're going to be able to respond to situations, to moment by moment, to what is being called for in order to liberate yourself, this other person, this situation, right? These are just some thoughts. My other thought, one of the other kind of warrior arts to me that's held in that kind of body of understanding has a lot to do with precision. You know, I call it neutral precision. And it means when you use your sword, you use it once and you're done. And you wait until you're ready to use it. And only then do you use it, right? It's not a flailing about. It's not just this kind of vomiting of energy because you don't have enough power to hold it inside of yourself. I mean, I'm with you in it. It's really hard to actually, and this is one of the things about anger, is that it's such an intense fire and a burn, and so it's so much to hold that we just kind of, like, at a certain point we just have to get it out, but because we're not maybe cultivating a deeper kind of strength of character and strength of being, what happens is we can't contain it long enough to let it ripen and long enough to choose what action is actually correct, what action is going to liberate us, what action is going to serve. We get to that point where we just can't handle it anymore. Sometimes it comes earlier than others, and then it's out, and whatever's just happened has potentially, and often, unfortunately, which I'm sure all of us can relate to, it's destroyed something. It destroys relationships. It destroys trust. There are tender things, especially in relationship, in community too, right? There are so many of the things that grow in intimacy and in relationship and between us and others are so tender. Trust, honesty. There's a tenderness to these things. They, for various reasons, right? And it's like you're holding, you want to protect that tenderness. And often when anger is, when our anger is more than we can, either more than we can hold, more than we've learned how to hold, or whatever that is, we will crush or hurt these tender blossomings of the things that we really want. And we hurt people in places that take a long time to heal. So, that's one of the reasons why we want to understand how to work with this raw power, because it can be used to liberate. It will set you free, in your own being, as your own energy. The more and more you come into it as, oh, this is mine, and it is burning through this body to purify this one here, to make, to strengthen and fire and temper where the line is around me, where no one will pass and no one will cross, what I will and will not tolerate, what I will not negotiate on. But once it's strong in you, that's no longer an argument. It just is what it is, right? That is the promise of anger, ultimately, is that it's like a tempering. It will temper your sword, right? It will temper your being and bring a level of strength that is ultimately, on some level, although it can never make us fully invincible, it's pretty unassailable. And it's liberating, not just because it shows you when something is or is not okay, or shows you where the line is, or it shows you truth, right? It helps you see clearly. It's also liberating because I just lost my train of thought. It's liberating for all those reasons. And the more I'm with it, the more I'm very aware of my next level of growth with this. And also my deep desire to have my anger ripen inside of me. I'm realizing how much I want that. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to be thinking about my boundaries or thinking about what is or isn't okay or thinking about how protected I feel. I want to feel what I know anger would bring, which is just a simplicity and a liberation in my being that is strong but neutral, not passive. Neutral meaning it doesn't entangle, you know, and it's not reactive. I don't want to be pushed and pulled by things. That's one of the other things I would say about anger is that why does it get so distorted all the time? Well, partly because it's such a powerful force, but also because since it's such a powerful force, the things in our world that like to manipulate us will target it. It's just like sexuality. This is why we're unburdening these specific four things. They are also some of the four aspects of what I'm saying is deep feminine power, but in general, human power. But because there's power in it, it's going to be a target for those forces in the world that don't have their own power and that manipulate and try to kind of um, disrupt your agency or my agency. And how easy is that if you can just be made to be pissed off and helpless about an endless litany of injustices, right? So we want to move out of that to a place of neutrality that actually makes us really useful and also much more likely to actually not only inhabit our own anger in a way that is nourishing, actually, but to enjoy our lives, to feel agency, to not have our anger and our sense of justice and all these things constantly diverted to places that it doesn't belong and that it can't really come into flower inside of, right? So these are some of my thoughts. I'm going to stop here before I keep losing my train, before I lose my train of thought again. I would love to have you join me. I'm pretty excited about this unburdening series. Warrior, lover, witch, pilgrim. You can join me for the entire series. You can join me for one if there's one in particular that's strong for you. They're going to be 90 minutes together, then probably 30 minutes afterward, just in discussion. The 90 minutes will be depth teaching, the unburdening, looking at the distortions. There'll be a practice with it, right? And then you'll have a month to kind of ripen with that until we move into the next one, if you choose to do the entire series. So thanks for considering this with me. And yeah, I would love to share this time with you.